And just like that, Kacia, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm
I feel
really
like we're going to have
excited.
such a juicy conversation about all sorts of things.
I
So thanks
know.
for having me, Jess. I'm
Of
pumped.
course. Well, I feel like this is one of those opportunities where we actually get to sit down and have a conversation and everyone else just gets to listen because you and I have crossed paths and been in each other's orbit for probably like 7 years. I mean, I think back to because you were Beachbody back in the
Yeah.
day and I was with Isogenics, and I feel like we were just on such similar paths so long ago. And we only actually met in person in the fall of this past
Yeah.
year, which is crazy.
It's so wild though, because when you meet someone that has also had a similar path or even just has like a vision that you can align with, it's so instantaneous where you're like, oh, okay, I feel like you're my person and I just get it.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I feel this comfort feeling with you and I love it.
I know. And the funny thing is too, we probably have actually been to events together, like at the same event, but not necessarily met each other.
Yeah.
Like
Now
for
is the
sure.
perfect time then. So here we are.
I know. So here we are. Well, let's get into it. I don't want to
Yeah.
waste too much time on your backstory because people could Google you and they can find out everything. But give me a little rundown of just sort of corporate world recruiting. You were
Yeah.
doing Beachbody, that I'm
Yeah.
assuming was a side hustle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blew that
Yeah.
up. You've moved like 100 times. We are welcoming in a brand new first little baby boy to the family. You just are under contract right now for your fifth investment property. Your podcast a couple months ago crossed 8 million downloads. So you're probably at like 9 or 10 now, which is insane. I mean, from the outside, it's like you've got it all together. You've built this massive thing, but where did it actually start?
It started with that gut feeling that I feel like a lot of your listeners can connect with, of feeling like I was in the wrong path, trying to shove down that feeling that was telling me that I wanted more. For me, I meant more alignment and comparing myself to other people, where I was like, gosh, because we become a byproduct of the expectations of people around us. So many of my girlfriends and my then boyfriend, now husband, they're like, Kacia, this is just what we do. Like, we go through this corporate world, you do this path, you climb the ladder, you count down the days until Friday. And I was like, that works for some people. Like, truly, if that's aligned for you, you're winning. But for me, I was like, this is not the right path. And I didn't know how to articulate it because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know what the hell I would do. So instead, I would just like ugly cry, these kind of cries where like your snot and mascara would get together in your mouth and you would choke on your spit. And I'd be sitting on the floor and I'd be like, what is wrong with me? Like, I didn't think that I was like, oh, I'm just not stepping into my potential. I felt like something was off with me and everybody else was like living the right life. And I was just like this weird one that couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't until, I started that first business, which was, to your point, in network marketing with Beachbody, where I did it on the side. My intention wasn't actually to like leave the corporate world. It was more so to have another stream of fulfillment, because I really did feel like I wasn't living up to my potential, or I wasn't getting to be this fully expressed version of me. Because working in the corporate world, and for me, I worked in tech recruiting and project management. So it's like I was shoving this like really bubbly personality just into a pencil skirt, and it just did not work for me. And it was really confusing because on paper, it made a lot of sense. And I feel a lot of people will resonate with this, where when it makes sense on paper and other people are validating you externally, like, wow, look at all of this. This is so great. You actually feel more confused often because you're like, why am I not just grateful for this? Why do I need to go do something else? But I've just basically like listened to this tug and pivoted so many times, whether it's physically where I'm living in the world or the types of products and programs and things that I've created, and just trusting my own intuition. And that if I'm gifted this vision, I'm also gifted the resourcefulness to figure out anyhow along the way. And that's led me to like all these twists and turns, and now to this conversation with you.
Yeah. So let's go back for 1 second to this idea of gratitude and alignment, because this is a huge conversation. And I know
Yeah.
you talk a lot about this when you're speaking on stages and with your community. You have an incredible community, by the way, which I want to talk about. But there's sort of this buzz that's been going on for a couple of years about alignment. And I personally feel that there's a misconception where you can be in alignment and yet still be bored.
Yeah.
Do you agree that like you can be in alignment but have a day that you feel off, or you're not, it's not
Oh,
sunshines and rainbows
yeah.
every day, right?
Oh my gosh. But isn't that why I guess like I kind of welcome those resistance seasons, or even those feelings of feeling off, because that's what actually makes me proud when I get where I want to go. Cause I
Yeah.
get to look back at the path that I took toward getting there. And I know all of the times that I felt confused, or like something was off, or I had to pivot, or I felt like I was sucking at something, or just didn't know what was next. And I had to figure it out. And I knew all the times that I wanted to give up. So I'm like, it makes you more proud when you get where you're wanting to go because of those seasons where it feels confusing, especially when things are good and you still feel off, which is just part of, I think, being a human is like, you're just going to have off days where you're like, what the hell's going on with me today? I don't know, but I'm not going to make that mean something like I'm not capable or I'm not worthy or I can't figure this out, but more so just like, oh, look at me. That's cute. I'm being a human. Okay. Welcome to the club. There's 7 billion of us, you know, like more of this like curiosity, playful lens rather than turning this into like, you know, catastrophizing of like, am I doing the right thing? Should I burn it all to the ground? Because I've had those moments. I've said to my husband before, I'm like, maybe I just burn it to the ground and I work at like a tiki hut, you know, in an island. And then I'm like, no, I'd be bored doing that. So,
yeah,
you know,
100%. We've all had those moments, but how do you personally navigate like the discernment between this is out of alignment or I'm having a human moment?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So I'm really good at toggling between this idea of like, I want to always try and be present where my feet are as much as I can, but I toggle to a 1 year prior version of me and a 1 year ahead version of me as often as I possibly can. Because 1 year prior version of me, I can look at all of the things that I've navigated through in my personal life, in my business, in my marriage, in my health, and whatever. And I can see all of the things that I met resistance and I figured it out. And here I am on the other side. And it just gives me a lot of gratitude for how far I've come in just a year. Yeah. And then I toggle to how is me showing up now, doing often the mundane, unsexy, not glamorized on social media things on a daily basis. How is that contributing to the vision of where I want to be 1 year from now? And like, what gifts will 1 year from me now be thanking me currently for? So it's almost like I'm like toggling between those two. And when I'm having like a human off moment, I can recognize that the dots still connect. Like, you know, the Steve Jobs quote that's like, you
my
can't
favorite
connect the dots
one
until you're looking backwards.
That's my
right?
favorite quote. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And it's so true. But I have to also get really intentional about connecting the dots moving forward. Because if I'm having, even right now at the time that we're recording this, it's like, you know, days out from a huge event that I'm hosting, it's like, there are some logistics that when I'm in it, I'm like, this sucks. Like, oh my God, why am I doing this? But I'm like, okay, like a future version of you. And I can think to a future version of me when the event actually happens, but I can also think to a future version of me 1 year from now who had this dream and vision to be super pregnant on a stage, because you don't see that like example often. I'm like, gosh, she's going to be so grateful to look back on this season. Like, just figure out this stuff. This is just you being human, you being annoyed, but like this does connect. The dots do connect. I think when I feel frustrated, but I can't connect the dots to how it's going to show up for me in the future in a positive way, that's when I know that I'm not in alignment. Where like, if I'm doing something, for example, like if I have a product or a program that I'm creating and I'm like feeling a lot of resistance, I pay attention to how I feel when I'm done doing that thing. Like I've closed programs where like when I got off of a Zoom call, I'm like, oh, I am drained by this.
Yeah.
And not drained because I'm stressed as a human, but drained because my soul doesn't like feel aligned. And I think intuitively we do really know, versus going through a contract for a vendor. Like that just sucks. Like for me, I just don't like reading contracts and all of that. I'm like, but that's just part of it. That doesn't mean that I'm not in alignment. It's like, that's just an annoying task, versus like when your soul actually feels depleted and I'm paying attention to the energy in which I have when I'm doing something, but also when I leave it. And that's a really good compass for me.
Yeah. Know. Do you ever navigate feelings of, but I might let people down, or what are people going to think, or judgment? Because I know for me, I've shut programs down where I hold on to them too long, and I'm holding on to them because of, I guess it's people pleasing, right? And just wanting to make sure that everybody's taken care of and no one's upset. So have you ever gone through that?
Yeah. The first time was when I left network marketing, because like I was making several $100,000 a year. I was speaking on all these big stages. I had a huge team, but I knew like intuitively, I had this very visceral feeling that I was like, this is not the right path. And when I was connecting the dots to where I wanted to be, I was like, this is not getting me there anymore. Yeah. And I just didn't want to do it. But I was like, what are people going to think? What is the corporation, like the corporate, like people going to think of it, that were asking me to speak on all these stages? What's my entire team going to think? Like I've shown this example of this lifestyle and this business. And instead of letting myself stay in it because I was worried about what they would think about me leaving, I decided to just make a very conscious decision back then. This was in 2015, that I was like, okay, My life is a testimony of what's possible for other people. I would never want someone that I love to stay in something that's not aligned because they're afraid of disappointing someone else. I need to go be this example of someone who's willing to pivot and transition and potentially even let someone down, because I just don't want to model the example of someone who's walking on eggshells, afraid of letting other people down. I'd rather just go blow it up and do what I want to do and trust that somebody needs to see themselves in that example, almost like as a permission slip to them to go do it too.
Yeah.
Like that just matters more to me, because then it just goes back to this idea. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gifted this vision to leave something that might be great by other people's standards, but is no longer aligned for me. So that means like I have to go do that because somebody's waiting for that example. And that just fuels me more than letting people down. I know I'm going to let people down. And honestly, Jess, like I've had to navigate this a lot recently with even just talking about being pregnant, because there are a lot of women in my community that are struggling with infertility. And I'm so sensitive to that because I know that journey is so difficult. There are also women in my community that don't want to have kids whatsoever, which again is totally cool. Everybody has different visions, but I actually had to navigate, like, how do I talk about the thing that is so exciting for me right now in a way that's still sensitive to other people, but then also knowing that I'm about to ostracize a huge group of the demographic of people that listen into my show, for example, that don't ever want to be parents, because I'm saying this is one of my biggest fuel sources now. And am I okay with letting people down? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that. And I actually got some feedback from a couple women that have been in my community for a long time. One in particular was like, I feel like maybe your content, like you should just make sure that you're not discluding people that don't want to have kids. Cause like, I don't want to have kids. And at first, to be honest, I was like, screw you. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, right.
Really
it's my content.
But then the second thing I thought was like, that's so interesting, because at this stage in my entrepreneurship journey, and even in like my podcasting journey, I'm confident enough to say, I respect your opinion, but I'm not going to let that dictate what I do.
Yeah.
But someone that's new in this space, that could totally derail them. Right.
Absolutely.
Like if they don't have the confidence yet,
Absolutely.
like, and I help so many podcasters that I like thought about that. And I was like, this makes me want to talk about it more. This makes me want to be fiery. This makes me want to like, be like, you know what? It's okay if I'm not for you on a bigger scale, because gosh, we need that example, and I'm not going to be for everyone.
Yeah. Something that I love about you so much, and Sina, together as a partner, as a pair, you're living, breathing, like you're walking the talk, right? So you don't just talk about it, and you don't just do it in your business, but you do it in your life as well. And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys moved to San Diego for like a whopping 5 minutes. Like you moved there for what, a month and a half?
No, we moved there we were there for like a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay. And then
so
decided to leave. Yeah, you were there for a second and decided to leave. And I'm sure at the time, because this is the same sort of decision making, right? And like, I could let people down. People could be, oh, you're crazy. Your steps from the beach. What's wrong with you? That's my dream. And you said, this isn't for us. This isn't for us right now. It's not what we thought it was going to be. We're not getting what we want out of it. And so we're going to pick up and leave. And I would guess, even in moments like that, there probably is conversation, because I know Mike and I have it all the time of, are we going to let people down? Are we moving away from people we care about? What is this going to look like? Is this going to affect our business? So I just want to personally just edify the two of you for living this in your life too, not just in the business, but you really do make the decisions and not really worry what other people might think. And I'm sure you probably did get pushback from that.
Yeah. The biggest one was we grew up in the greater Seattle area. We met in college at a house party when I was 19, drinking Burnett's vodka, dancing on a table, chasing it with Arbor Mist wine. That was the season of life.
Arbor Mist. Oh my God.
Disgusting. Literally. I was like that. Projectile vomit if I drank that now. And my husband's like, yeah, he's the one. And he looks like, you know what he looks like, but for people listening in, he looks like if Drake and Ross from Friends had a baby. So I was like, he's hot. I'll go on a date with him. Here we are 15 years later. So anyway, we left Seattle for him to go to dental school at NYU. And this is right when I started my entrepreneurial journey. And we were going to be there for 4 years. So our family and friends from Seattle were really comfortable with this. It's like, oh, look at them going on this adventure for 4 years. They're going to come back afterwards. And we made the decision not to come back to Seattle. And one of the reasons why was because I knew that I felt really out of place in Seattle, because I had amazing friends and our family is incredible, but I've always felt like I was the weird one, right? Like, oh, Kacia, she wants to go do all these crazy things. And like, oh, that's it. Like, when are you ever going to settle down? Like, are you guys ever going to get married? When are you guys going to start a family? Like, do you have to go chase all this big stuff? And it was out of the intention was pure and it wasn't malicious, but it was like, I can't be in this environment where I feel like I'm so out of place. So I was like, maybe I'll meet more entrepreneurs if we go to San Diego. Right. And maybe I can like kind of find my like people there and whatnot. And I just think that's really important. And not everyone's going to move across the country to make decisions like that. But that was a huge reason why we didn't go back to Seattle, is because I had to honestly get myself into an environment where I didn't feel so alone. I had people that when I told them my vision, they were like, yes, girl, go get it. Or like, you just scratched the surface, keep going. I didn't have those people in Seattle. And it's really hard when you morph back into an environment that it would be so easy to go back into a friend group and a family dynamic that you're so comfortable in. And I just like, I didn't want to risk doing that because I knew then I would have coulda, woulda, shouldas or regret, or honestly, even resentment that I lived my life in accordance to somebody else's success criteria, even if they had good intention. So I was like, I can't roll the dice on this.
Yeah. Not born for a pencil skirt for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you look great in them, but not born for one.
My personality just can't be shoved in there.
You have mentioned now, I think 3 times this vision, talking about connecting the dots moving forward, which we don't often do. What would you say to the person listening who is frustrated by you saying that because they don't have a clear vision? They're not sure what it is. They feel overwhelmed and they can't figure it out. Do you have like tactical steps to getting there?
Yeah, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find the one thing, or we look at other people that are at a different chapter or stage in their business or life, and we think, oh, maybe that's what I want, so that has to be my vision. But for me, it's always been this curiosity of like trying things on the side that has been really beneficial for me. So it was like, first, in the corporate world, let me try out this network marketing business on the side and detach from the outcome of it having to be the forever thing, because you're going to evolve, which means your vision and your business is going to evolve. And I think it's important to have a direction of where you're headed, but knowing that like you've got a clear vision, but you're loosely grip holding on to that because you know that you might change, and that's totally fine. And honestly, I think it's normal. But I started that on the side. And then when that became my full-time thing, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't burn the boats and just like jump to the next thing and quit. I started something else on the side. I was like, let me just play with this idea. So everything I've done has just been from the curiosity lens and being willing to close the door and not put so much pressure on myself that like the next thing has to be the big thing, but instead I can cross it off the list if I don't like it. And that's still helpful. And there are a lot of women listening into this that are waiting for the thing that they think is going to be perfect and it's going to be so aligned, or they start and they suck at it, because everybody sucks when they start at anything, right? Podcasting, events, like, think about your first like programs that you did. You're like, how in the world did this work? Right. I remember my first program, I wrote it on an easel and I spelled environment wrong, because that's a hard freaking word. And I really sent it to like hundreds of people, and environment was wrong. And I got all these emails and I was like, pretend like it's spelled right. I don't know. Spelling's not my thing. But truly, like a lot of times we create this meaning when we start something new. We put so much pressure on it. And we're like, this is my vision. This is my vision. Because I have to have a vision and everyone keeps talking about it. But it's like, no, maybe your vision is just to take one step and to decide this is aligned or this isn't. It's not, I'm good at this or I'm bad at this. It's like, do I like this enough to keep putting my reps in to get better? Or is this not my thing? For example, I launched a physical product. I launched a planner and sent it out, sold thousands of copies of this planner. And then I started getting so many questions about how to use this planner in a way that I was like, what? I do not want to answer these questions. And I just pulled the plug on it. I literally, the rest of the planners, we recycled it. I was like, I do not want to be in the physical product space. This is not my thing right now for that season. And pulled the plug and was just willing to walk away from it. I made like maybe $200 off of this total thing. Yeah. And started an online membership because that was more aligned for me. Sure. And it's like, I just think the pressure that we feel and we self-impose of, I need to know exactly what it is, but I would just encourage anyone listening in, ask yourself, what's something I've been mildly curious about? And what can I do in the next 24 hours to move the needle forward? Right? Even if it's like, you can't run, most people can't run a marathon. You probably could, Jess, tomorrow.
I don't think so.
Most people can't run a marathon tomorrow, but if you have this idea, you're like, I'm mildly curious about wanting to get into running. You definitely can find a marathon and sign up for it and commit to a training plan. You probably can't write a book in one day, but you could find someone that could help support you in that. And you can reach out to them and book their program or whatever, right? Like, it's like, what can you do to give yourself that dopamine hit? And then detach from the outcome of it having to be the forever thing. But it might also end up being the thing that's super aligned for you. Like podcasting was for both of us, right? Yeah. Or whatever that is. it's like, just like, we need to just shake off this pressure. It doesn't have to feel so intense,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, I love the
Yeah.
idea of sort of dipping your toe in the water and then giving yourself permission to let it go or test it for a little bit of time and then, release and detach from the outcome. Because I think I would say both of us are where we are right now for that exact reason. I mean, it was literally the same story. It's like, let me just try this. I feel unfulfilled. Let me just try this.
Yeah.
And, we always say at DBE, Digital Business Evolution, that we're always evolving and growing. And so is our business. And the clarity comes from the contrast. So it's like, you don't know that you don't like olives until you taste olives. So to your point, go reach out, try the book writing class or sign up for the marathon or just put your sneakers on and start walking. And you just reminded me of something that I actually haven't shared on the podcast, which maybe I'll do a whole episode on it. I have had this burning desire for, I don't even know, well over a decade, probably 2 decades, to write a line of children's books. And being an elementary school teacher, it just feels really natural for me. And so last year I actually signed up. I joined a mastermind to write my first children's book. And I was so excited. I told the team, I'm going to be putting time aside. Like, I'm not going to be as available. I was 2 weeks into it and I was like, no, this is not the right program. This is not the right time. This is not the right format. Like, I was resentful. And I showed up on 2 calls and I was like, wow, I have to sit with this. Is this resistance because it's hard and it's new and I'm feeling uncomfortable? Or is this out of alignment because this truly is not the season that I should be doing this? And I made the decision to say yes to it for the wrong reason. And when I realized that I did, and I was using it as a coping mechanism for grief that I was navigating, I was like, this is not the place that I want to write a children's book from. So I actually backed out, and I haven't shared that story. And I think so often people look at you and myself and some of our friends, and they think that we have our shit together and it's so easy and all these things, or I've never had a failed launch or whatever it might be. And it's like, no, I guess you could say I quit. Like, I quit that last year because it just wasn't right. And I will probably circle back in the future, but it was just totally out of alignment and for the wrong reason. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Well, it's so important for people to hear that too, because there's also this like pressure in this like instant gratification, Amazon Prime culture, where we're socialized to think if we accomplish things more quickly, it's better, or like, how fast can we get to that goal? But a big thing that you just brought up is like, you want to feel like you like the person that you are when you're accomplishing that goal, and that it does actually feel like you're truly, genuinely excited to be at that stage, to put the work in from a place of like, this is exactly what I want to be doing right now. And it's like, dreams don't have an expiration date. I think it's like, we have to understand that sometimes a season just doesn't make sense for us to do that.
Yeah.
And when you are like, and there are a lot of people that like, they're hiding right now. And I've done this for sure too. And I'm sure you've done this too, Jess, that you kind of just touched on this with grief, where like, you're using work and creating things to escape dealing with the actual stuff that you need to be dealing with in your marriage and your mental health and your relationships and your health, whatever that may be. You're just like, well, I'll just go chase this shiny thing because it'll distract me. And that's actually becoming a coping mechanism. I do believe that we intuitively know this, but we're just not slowing down enough to say, why am I doing this? Like, what place am I coming at this goal from? In fact, there are a lot of women, because I help so many podcasters that come to me, they're like, Kacia, I want to speak on stages. And I'm like, okay, why? Is it because you want the Instagram picture of it? Or like, do you actually love the idea of speaking on stages? Like for me, even with keynote speaking, with knowing that we're moving into a season of having a new baby, I'm like, I don't want to travel every single week with a new baby and like try and blow up a speaking career next year. Like, I don't want to write a book this year and try and go on a press tour. Like, that does not feel aligned. Doesn't mean I don't want it ever, right? I'm not like throwing that dream out, but it's just like, it doesn't make sense right now because I'm not going to like the person that I am while I'm in it.
Yeah.
And I think if we slow down enough to ask ourselves those questions, and then when we find an answer that we're like, ooh, crap, I didn't really think that was going to be the answer, we don't make it mean anything other than, okay, cool, that's feedback. Now let me pivot.
Yeah.
Right. And like
Yeah.
detach a little bit from the pressure of that too,
Yeah.
with this idea of quitting and it being a bad thing. I'm like, I have quit so many things.
We just
so that I
evolve.
can find something better. Yeah. It's like, quitting doesn't have to have a negative connotation. I think staying in something where you don't love it and wasting your TBD amount of days here, that feels like a bigger fail to me than leaving something to go find something new, even if it feels scary.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been on a mission for years to reframe the word pivot. It's like pivot and quit have this awful stigma around them. And it's like, no, you're just evolving. That's your job. You're growing. You're becoming a new person. That's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So let's talk about the podcast, because this
Yeah.
is probably for me the thing that I'm most excited to talk to you about. You get into podcasting a couple of years back, you're trying it on for size. It's super
Yeah.
exciting. Here we are, like I said, probably close to 9 million downloads later, almost 550 episodes in or something like that. You've interviewed some of the biggest names in entrepreneurship and coaching and digital marketing. Your podcast is massive. And I love that you teach people how to podcast. So I want to talk about the podcast, monetizing it, what you do differently, mistakes you've made, everything and anything in between. But I really want to start with when you first decided to podcast. I know you were just kind of trying it on for size.
Yeah.
What was the first iteration of the vision of it when it started to come to fruition?
The first was I was frustrated because I didn't feel as if there were enough podcasters. So this is the end of 2018. I didn't feel at the time there were enough podcasters that were giving advice like they were sitting next to you side by side. It was a lot of women. First of all podcasts, only 20% of hosts are women. So that in itself is a problem. But besides that, I felt as if the podcasters I was listening into, it was helpful that they felt as if they were a couple steps ahead of me, but they were giving advice in hindsight. Like back when I was in this season of my marriage or of my life or of my business, this is what I did. And I can give you advice now because I'm 5 years removed from it. Super helpful, but I was craving so badly someone that felt like they were a girlfriend that was in it side by side with me of like, I do not know what I'm doing right now. Like, how am I going to figure this out? I'm ugly crying on my bathroom floor. And I'm like, what's next for me? Like, can I figure this out? And I wish that I had that, just had that outlet. So I went to an event and I saw a podcast panel of 5 women that were podcasting. And I was like, wait, if these women can do this, so can I. And it was a very visceral feeling to start this. So I started Empower Her with the intention of creating this come with me, let's figure out life together type of community, where I knew straight away that the positioning of the podcast was going to be really therapeutic for me, but also that I could build a community of women that felt the same way that I felt, where they wanted that girlfriend that they could just be chatting with. And then the idea behind it was to also be an exit plan for me for network marketing, because I was like, if I build this on the side, then I could build a community and then I'll ask those people. So I didn't monetize it for a whole year. And I actually tried not to drive into my network marketing business from my podcast. It was just free value. If I felt lost, I would go find someone that wrote a book about feeling lost. Literally, someone wrote a book called You're Not Lost. Her name's Maxine McCoy. She was on my podcast. And like, I literally would just find, and I would just ask really transparent conversations that me and the listener would want to listen into. And fast forward a year, I had such an engaged community that I could ask them specifically what problems they had. And I could then go create products, programs, services, events, whatever, to solve those problems. So I did the community first. And my first intention was literally like, this could be an exit plan for me. But regardless, it's going to be super therapeutic, because then I could talk with people that feel the same way that I do, which is I had accomplished all this stuff on paper, but I knew that I wasn't like, I was getting to speak on stages to like 10,000 people and making all of this money and impact. And I felt really good about what I was doing because I knew how to do it, but I was bored.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And that was really confusing, because the first time that I felt like everything was like good, but I wanted more, I was in the corporate world and it wasn't so great, versus I had a lot of people that were validating what I had done in network marketing. Like, oh my gosh, how do I get there? I was literally training people to do what I did. So I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? So that was the first iteration of podcasting, was a therapeutic journey for me to connect with people. And then a very intuitive knowing that if I built a community first without the intention to monetize, that I could find what problems they had that I would be most excited to solve. And then I would solve those problems. And then it started with like a membership, and then it turned into podcast coursing. And then as people launched podcasts, then they wanted to know how to monetize and scale their shows. And I was like, oh, I was doing that, so I could teach that. And I did it in masterminds, and it just iterated to all of these different things. But it was literally just from doing market research with my like engaged existing community.
Yeah.
That's how I first started monetizing.
Simple, not easy. So when you have an engaged community, aside from you taking this approach of come with me rather than look at me, what are some other tactical tips that you can give for someone who's looking for engagement in a community? Because there are people who could build an audience. There are people who can build a community, 2 different things. But how do you actually have an engaged community? What are some of the things you were doing through podcasting that was helping with that?
two of the things that were really helpful straight out the gates that I think any new podcaster should be thinking about, or anyone that's at the stage where they really want to grow, is having some sort of like message that people can get behind. So it's almost like you're teaching people how to share about your show. So full transparency, we haven't spent $1 on advertising ever in my business or to drive to the podcast. It's been 100% organic because I'm telling Ashley that lives in Chicago, like if this podcast resonates with you, like share it with a girlfriend and here's why, right? So like my calls to action are in my show with a why behind it, right? I think a lot of times we give people like 800 billion calls to action. We're like, share it on Instagram stories, send it to your best friend, tag your grandma on Facebook, email it to your list and leave a 5-star review. And I'm like, I have ADHD. You just told me to do 5 things. Like I'm doing 0 of them. So I was really intentional about knowing like who is my listener and how can I get her to share this with one friend or to post it on social media and tag me, and I can start to build that relationship. So a call to action with a why, some sort of community building statement, like here we're all about this, or here we believe XYZ, or we don't believe da 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 da. Something that people can grab onto so that when they are telling their girlfriends about it, they're saying it in the way that you actually want them to, right? Like if you feel like you love transparency and like you want a podcast that's like girlfriends chatting over spicy margaritas, check out Empower Her, right? Like that's how people would then explain it. So then the right people come in and those people then want to share it as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like I was like telling people directly, like, this is why you need to share the podcast. And a lot of people are afraid to do that because they don't want to ask people for whatever reason, or they just overwhelm them with too many options, or they're doing it and they don't have an intention of like the community that they actually want to build and what they want that community to look like.
Yeah.
So early on, when I had this come with me idea, I was like, when eventually I do in-person events or retreats or whatever, like I had that vision early on. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I definitely couldn't have sold tickets to events early on because I didn't have enough people listening into the show. But I knew that the women that would come, they would value the same things that I valued of transparency, connection. They wouldn't want to be super perfect. They wouldn't be super, super like done up all the time because they were just like, they were really like this girl next door vibe that they just connected with that type of community. So asking yourself early on, like, what is the actual community that you want to build? That was really helpful for me too. So 3 tactical things. One is like having some sort of community building statement of like, here, we're all about this, or we believe XYZ. So people can grasp onto that. And they're like, oh yeah, I believe that too. Right. Then they become lifers. Secondly, is having a one call to action in your actual episodes, not just your extra, but explaining like, if this resonates with you, can you tag me on Instagram stories? Because while I love talking with you, I actually don't know where anyone lives in the world. And I'd love to personally thank you and see who's listening in. Or if this topic resonated with you and you have a girlfriend on your mind that you feel like could really benefit from this too, can you text her the link? That would mean so much to me. Very, very specific with a why. And then the third thing is like really envisioning what do we want the community to be about here? Because I say that often on my show where I'm like, here, like if you're listening in, you value transparency like I do. Like you don't try and pretend like your ish is together all the time. Like you don't need to be so polished. Like you're struggling with XYZ. So it's like they start to learn like, oh yeah, that's what we're about here. And that plants the seed for the future. And it also makes it easier to eventually sell products, programs, services, offers to that because you know their pain points.
Yeah.
Right. And their emotions.
Yeah. Majority of our listeners are selling products, programs, courses, and coaching. So they already know how important it is to figure out who your ideal client is. When you're doing something like podcasting, is that something that you would also teach people? Sit down, get really clear on who the listener is.
100%. But also you have to recognize, like, you know this, Jess, but like when you're recording a solo episode and you don't have any feedback from anyone, you have to really be able to plug into who that person actually is. So it's like avatar training for marketing on next level, where you're like, okay, before I record a podcast, and I've done 500 plus episodes, if they're solo episodes, I'm sitting down and I'm thinking, okay, where could Ashley, my avatar, where could she be physically right now? And what is like the emotions that she's feeling? And every time I'm recording an episode, I'm asking myself, although I can't control her emotions, what would I like her to feel from this episode? And often I'll tell her in the episode. My intention with today's episode is that I want it to feel like a girlfriend who just like lit a fire under your butt or like gave you like a smack on your booty. Like, let's freaking do this. Like, I want you to feel inspired by this. That's my intention. And I tell them the intention and then we go into the episode. Another thing that I think people don't understand the power of, that's really been huge for growing Empower Her, is I will purposely pick places that this person could be, or things that they're doing at the time that they're listening to the show and reference it. For example, switching your laundry, doing a workout, walking your dog, commuting to work, feeling like you're going into a job that doesn't let you the F up anymore. Like I'll say stuff like that. And then people will literally tag it or DM me and they're like, I feel like you have cameras in my house. So it's a way to like get so much more connected to them, is like you're referencing something. It won't hit home with everyone,
Sure.
but Sarah in Alabama, who's switching her laundry, and you said you might be doing laundry. She's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
Right. And then she wants to tell her friend. And I just have like celebrated along the way. Like I remember early on, like every, 1,000 downloads or whatever it was, like I would jump on this mini trampoline and I brought people along on the ride where I was like, I can't even believe this. Like I was celebrating like I won the damn Super Bowl. I wasn't waiting until 9 million downloads to be like, now I'm proud of myself. And I think there are a lot of people that forget how people want to feel like they're part of something. So how can you co-create with your audience, and how can you bring them more behind the scenes and take off this lens of like, let me wait until I get there to feel accomplished or celebrate, and instead celebrate with them, because then you're embodying that example to show them to celebrate in their life. And I just have done that like for every single little milestone along the way. Like early on, Jess, I used to, because I pitched people to be on my show through video DMs. I don't do this anymore. I get so many of those now that I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to see like some sort of weird thing. Like, I don't know who this creepy guy is with your eggplant emoji, but like, I used to pitch video DMs. And I remember one of the first people I pitched was Dave Hollis.
Wow.
I wanted him to be on my show, and I didn't even have a name for the show yet. I just figured I would like call my shot and just start throwing it out there. And he responded and he said yes. And I was like, oh shit, I don't even have a name for my show yet. And I remember when he was on the show, he was my third ever guest, my second interview. And he came on, and this was at the time where like him and Rachel were married and like their business was blowing up and all this stuff. And he came on, and the first person that was on was his producer with like a green screen behind him. And they were setting up all these fancy mics, and I had a side ponytail with a scrunchie. And I was like, what? And I had to like in real time be like, okay, this is what like you're feeling some like imposter syndrome or something, like label this excitement, because if you label this fear, you might like pee your pants right now. And I just remember thinking like, I wasn't embarrassed to tell my community how much I was like freaking out about this. And I also wasn't embarrassed. Like I would show the DMs that I would send to people, and I would take off their name and be like, fingers crossed this person says yes. And I took them along early on, and people were like, wonder who it's going to be. And I just created that hype because I wasn't afraid to look like I didn't know what I was doing, Was
that something you were taught or something you just intuitively were doing and then it was working?
I was doing it because it felt really me.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things too, that I think a lot of business owners don't think about is like, what's your human goal with all of this? And, when I got into entrepreneurship, it was because I felt like I was shoving my personality into a pencil skirt. And I was like, if I go do this entrepreneurship thing, maybe that will be when I can be the more fully expressed, like Kacia version of me and figure out who she is, which back then I was 24. And it's like, my human goal with building a business was like, I just want to learn how to be more myself and be comfortable to be the person that I am behind closed doors with my best friends or my husband more publicly. And so like, I was like, I'm just going to do it my way. And if it doesn't work, then whatever, at least I get to look back and feel like I liked how I showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Learn the rules to break them. I think that was Picasso. It's like, learn how to paint inside the lines so you can just be creative outside of the lines, right? And figure out the tools and decide how you want to use them. So now you've been monetizing your podcast for years, right?
Yeah.
What are some different ways that people can monetize a podcast? And do they have to have a certain number of downloads or subscribers before they can start monetizing?
So first, I think people overlook the power of just driving to your own products, programs, services because of the fact that it's a voice platform and it's so intimate. When people get used to hearing your voice, they also read your content, like your copy, the written copy in your voice, which helps them connect and it converts more. And you can give context on podcasts, right? Like if you're feeling this way and like you can touch more on emotions, which I personally love. You're also in intimate spaces with them in the shower, in the car. Like you can really hit them in a different way. Yeah. whatever it is. And it's amazing R roll. Wow.
Oh, thank you.
And so I first monetized through my own ads about my own products, programs, and services. I'm a huge person that's an advocate of a mid-roll ad when someone's already in the juice of the podcast, rather than starting with your offer and not making things too time sensitive, because understanding that podcasts can have like, they get spread at different times and not everyone's going to listen to it in real time. So sometimes those sense of urgency ads that you put for your products, programs, services are like these deadlines. You're assuming that people are going to listen to it when it drops, but they might listen to it later. So keep that in mind when you're creating ads. But that's the first way. Second way, I think affiliate marketing is the easiest way to do it. Whether that's for anyone listening in, like you probably know what affiliate marketing is, but it's like any products, programs, services, offers, other programs that you've been through, reaching out to those companies or those people and saying, do you have some sort of an affiliate? That's the easiest way to monetize. And you can do that with any amount of downloads. People get shiny object syndrome about sponsorship. And full transparency, I make over 6 figures with sponsors on my show. But that's not the way that I make the most income. The most income is driving to my products, programs, services of my own that I create. Because sponsorship, typically what they want to do when you're signing a sponsor is they want to do a trial period of like 30 days-ish. They want to see if a code that they'll give you, like an affiliate code, converts at the rate that you want it to, and then you can get flat rate sponsorship. Or you can do some combination of flat rate and affiliate. So I have sponsors that will pay me monthly flat rate for like 2 ad mentions. But now that I'm at the size of my show, that I have enough downloads that it makes sense. Most people, I honestly think if you just start with your own products, programs, and affiliate, that's a really great way to start. But again, like we touched on earlier, it's like, let's continue to do market research with our audience as we're building this engaged community, because even I would personally take 100 podcast listeners over 5,000 Instagram followers. That's how much of a difference it is because of the conversion rate of someone who knows, likes, and trusts you so much more quickly through a podcasting platform. They get to know your personality, right?
Yeah.
I am on social media and I'm consistent on social media, but I'm always trying to drive from rented platform to owned platform all day, every day. I will take a podcast listener or a tech subscriber or an email list subscriber over a follower on any platform. I just don't care as much about it. Right. Yeah. Because that I own and nobody's going to shut down my account. So
we talk about this all the time on here, and there's no algorithm. And also those are long form content pieces. So if your podcast is top of funnel, you can take whatever you say in your podcast and you could splice it up and you can transcribe it and it can turn into a blog and you can drive SEO and you can turn it into emails and social media posts and you can have an editor cut out pieces and turn them into reels and TikToks and it can just go and go and go. So I know for us, my podcast is not nearly as large as yours. We just started it. It's new, still in the infancy stage, but it's the top of our funnel. We film everything horizontal, it goes up, it gets edited, goes on YouTube, YouTube Shorts, vertical video, this, that, the other. And it's a platform you own, like you said, which is so important. Yeah.
Well, and Jess, I want to touch on one thing too, is a lot of people that I've helped launch podcasts, they have a business and they're like, oh, I want to create a podcast. And first we have to make sure that podcasting is actually the platform that they want to create, not just because they think they should, because somebody else told them that they should, that they actually like it. But then from there, I have never, so in 500 and however many episodes, I have never done a podcast about podcasting, yet I have made hundreds of thousands of dollars in podcasting courses. And a lot of people tell themselves the story of, I need to niche to the specific thing that I'm talking about because that's my specific offer. But when you think of podcasting, like you just described, top of funnel, there are some people that are going to want to start a podcast that are in my community. There are some existing podcasters that want to scale their podcast. There are some people that are going to want to come to my events, that are going to want to come to retreats, that are going to want to connect with me about real estate deals, that are going to want to buy from our sponsors. And there are some people that are just going to listen into free content and maybe join my text list, right? Yeah. So it's like, when you think about it top of funnel and you think of these silos, I think one of the most beautiful things about podcasting is when you're growing something like that, it does give you the opportunity to hit with all of these sub demographics of who you'll bring in. So don't tell yourself the story that you have to be so niche that you don't get to feel like you're a fully expressed version of you. Because I think podcasters that win for the long haul, winning meaning they actually like it so they can show up and stay consistent, but also people really connect with them, is because they're showing all different facets of who they are within this funnel. Yeah. And so a lot of times people are just like have in their head niche. And like, yes, I understand that for sake of social media and things like that. But with podcasting, people want to know you more holistically, I think.
Yeah. My guess would be, based on your episodes, 500 something episodes, the ones that have done best and that you've heard from people the most are probably the ones that you're just most human talking about what you're going through and mindset related versus tactical 7 steps and 6 strategies, which for me, full transparency is difficult. Not being transparent. Like I'm good with being vulnerable. I'll talk about anything all the time, but I'm a default teacher. Like my default is always to teach, and I'm very tactical. And so as soon as I set up the camera or hop on a mic, I'm like, all right, let's break down the 3 steps. Let me talk about the 5 reasons. Here are the 3 P's to this and the 7 S's to that. And we have found for my podcast that our audience is like, no, just talk about mindset. Just talk about mindset. I'm like, but I'm a business mentor. They're like, but I just want to know mindset. And I'm like, really? And then I think back to all the episodes that I love, whether it's you or Lori Harder or whomever it was that got me into podcasting, Lewis Howes, Gabby Bernstein back in the day. And I'm like, oh yeah, I was folding laundry, or I was commuting to work, or I was walking the dog, and I was hearing about overcoming limiting beliefs, and I was loving the thing about boundaries and this. I'm like, that's so interesting. I guess that's really what people want to hear.
Yeah. And you can do both, right?
Yeah, totally.
And obviously some people will vibe with whatever they feel like they need in that point in time, but often we think we need the tactics.
Yes.
And even like my courses, like taking from idea to launch, and people think that they want to know how to launch a podcast. What most of the women that join my courses need is the permission slip that they have to learn how to give to themselves, that their voice matters, that they need to get this message out into the world. And they just need like a little like community of people that are doing it with them. Tactics you can Google. And I tell them that, like, you go Google this if like you just want to figure out how to start a podcast, but if you're like, this is what we're actually going to do in here, you know?
And then you've built up this incredible community, and you host your first formal large event last year and sell out 500 tickets to your first event. And I'm assuming it was mostly because of the community and the podcast that you had built, right?
And it's interesting because I wanted to do it much earlier. And as in like, I wanted to do the first one in 2020, but you know, the world had different, plans. And it's funny because it took longer than I thought to get there. Well, that when you say it that way, it's like, whoa, that sounds really crazy. But like, I had been answering every single DM for years at that point and like really knew my community. Like I probably knew by first name over 200 people that were at that event. Without even like looking at just because I'd been doing so much stuff with them for so long. But I honestly think because it did take longer to get to that point than I thought that it would, I was even more grateful when I got there.
I love that.
And I'm so happy that it took as long as it did, because I don't think the thing that people don't often talk about is, you know, they want to get to, let's say, 1 million downloads on their podcast or whatever. And I've asked a lot of people when I've done coaching stuff where I'm like, how many of you would love to have 100,000 downloads a month on your podcast right now? And the chat's always like, yeah, I can't, just like me. I'm like, interesting. If I had that at the beginning, I would have not been able to handle it. I wouldn't have been able to handle the negative feedback, or honestly, even the positive feedback. Because I think that, you know, John Maxwell has a quote that says, success to me is when people that know me best love me most. And I can't get too high on the positive feedback or too low on the negative feedback. I had to really just like own myself and know like my own voice and have the confidence to talk about what I wanted to talk about. Now I can handle negative feedback and the amount of ears that are listening in. But I really did need the time. And now we're coming up on, 4.5 years of podcasting twice a week, every single week. I needed this time to actually build the confidence for it to get to this stage. I couldn't have handled this earlier. It would have all spontaneously combusted because I just wasn't the person yet that could handle it. And so as like women that often, are go-getters that are listening to the show, it's like, we want to get there more quickly, but please remember that if you don't give yourself this space to build the coping mechanisms and the confidence and the community and the resourcefulness and just like this grittiness that comes from all of the like missteps along the way, like you're robbing yourself of actually sustaining it when you get there, So like, I'm grateful for the amount of time that it took to get there. And I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I'm mostly proud of the person that I am, like when I'm by myself, like how I feel about myself when I'm by myself.
Yeah. Well, and the time is going to pass regardless. And so no matter what, it's going to pass. And it goes so fast. I mean, you're talking about 2020 and we all remember what went down. And that literally feels like a lifetime ago, yet also yesterday. And so the time is going to pass, and I'm a visual person. So I see this tree in a pot, like in a home, right? There's a plant in a pot in a home. And we often wait until it's busting out of the seams. The roots have hit the edges before we repot it. And there's a time and a space, and there's this tiny moment where we actually need to remove it from the current pot that it's in because it's outgrown it and put it in a bigger pot so that the roots can continue expanding. But what we don't need to do is we don't need to move it before the roots have actually even hit the edges, because then you just have a pot, you have this plant in this soil that's not even touching the edges of the pot is too big. And that's what it is. And we talk about it all the time. It's like, you're not ready yet to hold what you think you're going to one day, which is great. Like you will, and have the vision and have the goal, but you might not have the tools, the skills, the emotional intelligence, like you're saying. And so allow the journey to be whatever it is. I love it so much. So last year's event was absolutely incredible. I unfortunately was not able to be there. I wanted to be there. I felt like every single person I knew in the entrepreneurial world was there, whether they were speaking or they were in the audience. But you sell out over 500 tickets to your first event. What were some of the lessons that you learned? And what are some of the things that you're doing differently this year? Because if you didn't know, the event is in 11 days, 10 days from when we're recording this?
Yeah.
It's happening again.
It's so wild. And this one's going to be super saucy because I'm going to be 34 weeks pregnant during it.
Unbelievable.
Which is wild. I literally look like I ate a watermelon. So here we are. So from a tactical perspective, I think like it was the biggest. I've invested in myself before, but like writing a check to book a venue with a food and beverage minimum and all of these things, having no idea if you can actually sell it, is literally the ultimate growth opportunity. I was like, oh, here we go. Like, I felt like I was going to vomit, and I needed that so bad. I needed that stretch, but also because I had been co-creating with my community, it was like, I'm thinking about doing this. Would you be interested in this? Like, I was playing with this idea with my community long before I ever even launched tickets, right? I'm not a big proponent of creating something behind closed doors and then launching it into the world. Like, surprise, look what I created. Because I want to make sure that it's actually going to convert, like from a business perspective. So I knew that people were interested in it, and they had been asking for in-person events for a long time. So I had built that up over time. So it did feel like I had confidence that it would convert. I didn't know like who would be part of it. I didn't know exactly how it would work. I definitely recommend that you really think about the actual feeling of the event and make sure that you're doing it for the reasons that are actually aligned. Because a lot of times people come up with this idea of like, I want to do big events because they like the optics of it. But I will tell you, big events, I like make the least amount of money with big events of all the things that I do. It's not very profitable. We make a profit, but really how people make profit on events is they sell to something else at the event. And a lot of people think that like, oh, 500 women at an event, you're going to make so much money doing that. Cause like they add up all the ticket sales in their head and I'm like, yeah. But like you have AV is literally like,
oh my God, so expensive.
Much money. When I got an AV quote, I was like, what?
Yeah. The littlest things too. It's like, oh, we should do a photo booth or something for the girls. They'd love that. And then you're like, it's how many thousands of dollars?
Literally. Yeah. So I don't want to discourage people from doing events, but I also want to just tell you that I've done retreats on a smaller scale with like 12 women, and the amount of time and effort versus the amount of income that you make is drastically higher with smaller events. I just want to disclaimer that, because a lot of people get caught up in like, look at this huge thing. Like I should do that. I'm really glad that I did it. It was like such a dream come true, but like, this Empower Her live event is the last one that we're doing. And one of the reasons is because what I just said, just to be fully honest about it, is like becoming a new mom and trying to figure out how to actually like make sure that I'm getting the biggest ROI for my time spent in my business is really important to me. And, but as far as like actual tactical things, like definitely find people who have done what you've already wanted to do or what you're wanting to do, and pick their brain as much as you possibly can, whether that's buying programs or like whatever from them, or paying to get like access to them, or getting yourself in communities and making sure that you're pouring into other people. Because when the time comes where you need help, you have this community of people around you. Be the person who's constantly pouring in. Because I had people that were able to help me from a tactical perspective, like Lori Harder, like sat on a call with me for an hour and a half going through like my timeline. And like, cause I had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, can anyone that's done this before help me? Right. So being don't be afraid to ask for help. Make sure that proactively you're co-creating with your community. Think about the actual feeling that you want from the event. Don't give yourself a letdown by thinking that you're going to monetize so much from the event. You're going to have to do this because you really want to actually just have women together in person, because while you can monetize and you will make some money, you won't make what you could make in digital products. It's just, it's uncomparable. I also really did not do a good job the first year of managing the budget of things. I mean, like way over budget. So got so excited that I wasn't like vetting things. Like I was not a smart business owner about the first one. It was epic and I loved it. Yeah. But looking back at the things that I like thought mattered, those things don't matter. People care about the connection and they want to feel like they're part of something. And like all of the shiny stuff, just think about a wedding, right? Like I couldn't even tell you right now what kind of napkins we had at our wedding. And we got married a year and a half ago. I don't even remember like what they were, but I probably spent a ton of money on them and thought that it mattered, right? It's like, people don't care about the details. They care about the feeling. Number one, like that's what they're going to tell you. The feedback that I got was like, I felt so included. I met some of my best friends there. I felt so inspired. I felt like you were so present. So for me, it was really important for me to find people, volunteers, and people that I hired that I could have around me at the event so I could do what I do best, which is make people feel seen and heard and loved and supported. Like I wanted to be there rather than worrying about all of the other things.
Yeah.
And I also just want to remind people, I want to share this real quick.
Yeah.
I reached out to Jamie. So Jamie Kern Lima is the founder of It Cosmetics. She, for people that don't know, she sold her company for $1.2 billion to L'Oreal. She became the first female CEO in L'Oreal history. But beyond that, although that is like, whoa, she's absolutely incredible. She's an incredible human being, like to her core, a true actual example of a champion for other women. I had her on my show twice, and she wrote a book called Believe It, which is also incredible. So I reached out to, we were connected on Instagram, and I knew that like her team or someone followed me on Instagram because I would see, like they would comment on stuff and like whatever. So I DM'd her because I was like, what's the worst that can happen if I ask if she's willing to donate 500 books to swag bags? I was like, she'll say no. That's the worst that can happen, right?
Right.
So I reached out. Her assistant, Sarah, actually ended up calling me and was like, Kacia, Jamie's been watching what you've done. She really wants to be part of your event. She's willing to waive her keynote speaker fee and come surprise your community just because she wants to be part of this. And she wants to show you how much she loves the way you show up in the world. And I was like, what?
I remember watching that reel.
Ugly crying my face off. I was like, and luckily my husband actually filmed it because I like needed that for me. Like the intention wasn't even to share, but it was more like, oh my God, it was one of the coolest things ever. And why I'm saying that is because if you do not ask, the answer is always no, whether that's podcast guests, whether that's someone to speak on your stage, someone to come teach in your community, someone to whatever. Like we need to stop with the narrative of, oh, this person's too far along in their career. They're never going to want to be on my show. Or this person's too busy. They're never going to say yes to this. Like BS, ask them. You have no idea. Like I could have never in my wildest dreams pictured that Jamie Kern Lima would come to my very first event, let alone all the other incredible speakers. But that was so huge for me because she's my number one entrepreneur that I like I'm obsessed with.
That's amazing.
And I just want to tell people that because like, it wasn't because I had millions of downloads on my podcast or I had this like huge social following or anything like that. It was just because she saw that it was real. So you being you, showing up, unapologetically asking people to be part of whatever it is that you're doing, co-creating with your audience, like that's what got me here. And that's what makes me feel really fulfilled, you know? So like, I just want people to realize like them doing it their way is enough, you know?
Yeah. Oh, if there's one thing you're taking away from this episode, it's got to be something about community and just doing it your way. Because you keep saying it, whether you're talking about leaving the job, starting the thing, dipping your toe in the water, the podcast, the event, it's like the same message over and over. So I hope you're hearing it. Tell us a little bit more about Empower Her Live, because it is a couple days away. We have September 22nd to 24th in Denver. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Who's it for? What's going down? Tell us everything.
Oh gosh. It's kicking off with a live podcast on Friday night with Natalie Ellis from Boss Babe.
Of course it is.
And I have a real great surprise because of how pregnant I'm going to be. That's going to be really wild. And then it's really just an opportunity, like what I really care about. And I know you get this, Jess, because you and I both love going to events and being in rooms like this. Podcasting is incredible. Online programs are incredible, but there's something about getting to physically hug another human being that when you tell them your ideas, they're like, yes, girl, I get this. How can I support you? And that you don't feel alone in whatever that is. Maybe it's just that you don't want to have a good marriage. You want an exceptional marriage, or it's that you really want to chase this like big dream, or like you have things on paper that make sense, but you want more, which is how I literally felt. It's like, you have to get in the vibrational energy. And what I love about Empower Her is it's actually 2.5 days. So you have to immerse yourself a little bit, because I like some events where you get to like pop in and like pop out, because that's what I need in that stage. But this is really for the person that wants to get themselves physically in a room and stay in a room for 2.5 days to get to meet and connect with people that look like the direction of where they're headed, that actually do value what we value in the Empower Her community, which is this transparency and connection and very genuine approach to life and business, and proving that you can have both an incredible business that you want, but also a life that you want, right? Even if it doesn't make sense to other people. So it's really like a combination of amazing keynote speakers. The lineup is absolutely insane, but beyond the lineup of speakers, it's also like panels and little connection opportunities for women in the room that I'm really, really passionate about, like just getting you to meet people around you.
Yeah.
So if you've been craving connection, that's what it's really all about. And it's going to be really freaking fun, because I don't do anything that's not fun. Like, it's just going to be like, let's shake our butts, let's get inspired, and let's like have the people to help support us and where we're wanting to go. So yeah. If you want to come, you can still snag your ticket. You can go to empowerherlive2023.com, or you can DM me Kacia Ghetmiri on Instagram, and we'll get you in the room. If it is tugging at your heartstrings, like even if it's last minute, I've done that before where I'm like, I don't know why, but I just need to go.
I
and
need
you
to
don't
go.
even really know why. And then you
need
just
to
get
go
there and you're like, oh, this all makes sense.
Yeah. How many people are you anticipating this year?
It'll be around the same size.
Yeah.
Because that is also like a real sweet spot of just like wanting to get to have everyone connect and it feeling intimate, but still big. So you get that vibration too. So around the same size.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. We'll drop everything in the show notes all about the event. I also just am stoked for the lineup. You have all sorts of people speaking, like physical product businesses and regular just digital products, and moms and women at the beginning and women at the end and all the different stages. And I'm so excited. There's so many different opportunities for connection. And I say it all the time, I would not be here if it weren't for getting in those rooms and going to those events and rubbing elbows with people that I didn't know from other states who are doing things as well, similar or bigger, and to let people be your expander and your supporter. So yes, we will drop all that in, aside from the event and the brand new baby on the way, which I'm so excited, and all the houses. How can people work with you? How can they find out more about you? What do you have going on?
Yeah. So my favorite way to connect outside of Empower Her podcast, which they can go check out, is my text community. I send out little inspo texts every Sunday and then randomly throughout the week. And that's also where you can stay in the loop of like anything coming for podcasters, retreats, events, real estate. Like I'm very multi-passionate. So if you want to text the word START to 512-548-2728. Again, you can text the word START to 512-548-2728. That's how you'll get these fun little inspo texts. They're kind of like if your saucy bestie and a fortune cookie had a baby. That's the vibe.
I love it. I love it so much. We'll drop that in the show notes too. Any last words before we just do a quick rapid fire?
I just want to remind anyone that's listening, and this just came to me right away, is like, please don't make that space between where you are now and where you want to go be something that you're labeling as intimidating or overwhelming or exhausting, or like you can't get there, or looking at somebody else and thinking that they have something that you don't. Because I truly, and I said this at the beginning, but I really hope that this hits home, is like, you would have never, ever, ever been gifted this vision on your heart for what you want to create or the life that you want to live if you weren't also gifted the resourcefulness. And we get so caught up in the hows, like, how am I ever going to figure this out? It's like, that's what the path teaches you. It qualifies you to handle it. And like, I just wish that we could just trust ourselves more, because full transparency, sitting here at the time that we're recording this at almost 33 weeks pregnant, going into a season where we just went under contract on our 5th investment property that we were able to buy because I started a business in 2015. So my husband could then leave dentistry to find something that feels aligned, to know that we're going to get to be present parents with our baby boy. Like, I'm like, I had no idea what I was gifting a future version of me, like doors that are now opening that I didn't even know that I would want to open for myself and even for my husband and for our future family. That the woman listening into this who's struggling in a season of her business, keep going. Like, even if you have to throw shit against the wall and you're like, I don't know, and you have to pivot and you don't, maybe even you're like, Kacia, I keep hearing you talk about vision. I don't know what my vision is. Just take the next best step, because I just know that a future version of you is going to look back at you now and be like, thank you, God, for how you showed up. And I'm feeling that in real time. So I just want to remind the person listening in of that too,
Well, to no surprise for my community, I'm crying. Shocking. Doesn't take much.
I love you.
All right. So good. I'm like, we should just end it there, but I gotta ask a couple rapid fire questions. You good for that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. If you were to give a TED talk on nothing that you're known for, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Oh, I would probably pick like a random skill that I would want to learn, like how to unicycle or something. And then I would teach myself how to do it and then teach it in a really weird way. Like just something so random that they would be like,
Perfect.
what? And it would be a skill that I
Perfect.
don't even have yet. So I'd learn it so then I could teach a TED talk on it.
I'm very excited for that. I love it. What's one of your guilty pleasures?
It's interesting because I like reality TV sometimes, but I don't feel guilty about it. Like it's all
Yeah.
like, especially right now, because I'm pregnant, I eat a fudgesicle and I watch reality TV and I'm like, I'm living my best life.
What type? What's
like
your go-to reality?
like The Bachelor or
Okay.
like that type of stuff. Yeah.
Love it. So good. What is something people get wrong about you?
Sometimes people don't take me seriously because of how I can come off very like happy-go-lucky and like where they don't think I have as much depth as I do. And that's been interesting getting even into the real estate investing space when I'm speaking at real estate events where I know a shit ton about real estate. But sometimes because I come off as like, oh, like we're doing this, they don't understand. And I actually love that.
Yeah.
I like to be underestimated and then come in
totally.
and be like, ha sucker.
Yeah. Right hook. I love it.
Right hook. Yeah.
$50,000 question. If I were to give you a check tomorrow for $50,000 that you had to invest in the business, in or on the business, you could break it up if you wanted to, or use it in one lump sum. How would you use it? I would do what I just did, but I would join a mastermind of women that are at the exact same season of life as me. I just joined a mastermind called CEO Mama, and it's for like 7-figure entrepreneurs that have young kids. Yeah. Because I recognize this like anxiety came up where I was like, I do not have enough friends around me right now that want to build 7-figure big businesses and also have young kids. I was like, oh my God. And I started panicking. I was like, wait, okay, I need to sign up for something. And then I did. So that's what I would do. Was that Natalie's or Catherine's? Natalie's, right? Natalie Ellis's. Yeah. I'm like, I remember seeing that. It's so interesting being on the other side of that journey and being like, oh, I can't apply to that yet. Yeah. So but when you weird. When you can, it will all make sense why the timeline was exactly what it was. Yeah, for sure. It's just an interesting thing as like a type A control freak, go-getter type of high achiever where you're like, oh no, the revenue, like the financial thing, like I got that. Give me like a goal I have to hit. But like the kid thing, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Well, I asked if I qualify. I was talking to her about it. I was like, do I qualify? Because like he's technically still in the womb. Like I'm growing a penis while we're talking right now. And like I was like, do I still count? And she's like, yeah, you count. Like you can be in. So like, funny. Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. All right. Last question. Like I said earlier, we named our company Digital Business Evolution because we believe you're always evolving and growing. And as you grow and evolve, your business does as well, or your vision does as well. Yeah. Or the penis inside of you, as you said. So what is your next personal or business evolution? I'm going to take a season of pausing, which I have not done since I started my business in 2014, January of 2014. And not that I haven't like gone on vacations and stuff like that, but I'm going to take in a very intentional season. I have this vision. I'm going to just say this right now because I'm manifesting it. Okay. So our baby boy is due November 3rd, but I have this vision of me. I've had a dream 3 times about this. I'm dressed up as a disco ball on Halloween with my belly painted with sequins and all these like little pieces of glitter. And I go into labor where my water breaks like in the movies. And I look at my husband, Cena, and I'm like, we're going into labor. And I go to the hospital and I tell them that I don't want him to be born on Halloween. I want him to have a November 1st birthday. And he comes out at 12:01. And I had the natural childbirth that I wanted. And he comes out at 12:01 and like sequins are flying in the air. So, I love it. And after that happens, I'm taking a very intentional maternity leave where I'll keep my podcast going, but I'm just going to create space to just like let myself be and savor a season that I've been working really hard for a really long time and say no to anything that I don't feel like is an yes until I figure out what comes next. But I also have a dream of creating some sort of like huge property where we have like a bunch of tree houses or A-frames on it. I don't know. We'll see. Putting that out there for it. I'm here for it. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for you and Cena. And I can't wait to meet this little guy in person and for all the women that are going to be transformed at your event coming up and just everything that you've gone on. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the way that you have just paved the path and continue to take those little steps forward and be okay with whatever it turns out to be, because you have changed thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. And you are certainly an expander for me. So Kacia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jess. I just
Yeah.
hug you. I appreciate
I
you,
know,
girl.
I know. And if you love this episode, which I know you did, and there were as a mic drop moment that just got you feeling all the feels, do us a favor, take a screenshot, share it on social media, tag Kacia over at
Kacia Ghetmiri, which is the hardest name to spell, Kacia, and then I'll pop up.
Yeah, perfect. Kacia, and she will pop up. Tag me at I am Jessica DeRose. Let us know what your takeaway was so that we can personally connect with each of you. And if you don't know why, well, then you were not listening to the episode earlier. So go ahead and rewind it. And as always, friends, cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.